We got our first look at DMZ the other day. For some, it was underwhelming. For others, it was amazing. For me, it was an interesting twist on COD that has a ton of potential, but still has yet to be seen what it will totally stack up to be. Now, what happened was a ton of Warzone streamers and a few Tarkov streamers got invited to LA to Infinity Ward's headquarters to do a early play reveal, if you will, of DMZ and Warzone 2.0. What we got was 2 hours of playtime on each of them. And honestly, this wasn't enough to even scratch the surface. I feel like maybe we got to see about what 10% of this demo had in it, which means if the demo wasn't complete, we got to see even less of what the final version is going to be. So the entire gameplay loop and all the features, I think, still has a lot to be discovered by a lot of people once the game goes live. Long story short, to save you time, if you don't want to watch the whole video, I guess, if you don't like Warzone or COD Spec Ops, you're probably not going to like DMZ. But with that said, you should still try it. The only person you're doing a disservice to is yourself if you don't at least download it and give it a whirl. It's free. It's not going to cost you anything. And you never know. You might find something about this that you like, even if you don't like those other game modes. And this will happen on the 16th, November 16th, and we'll all get a chance to try it then. Now, all in all, it kind of looks like Spec Ops and Warzone had an illegitimate child, if you will. That's what DMZ is. It was very polished in the sense that the game mechanics worked well. Everything on the base of the game was there, and there was no hiccups with that. But it had a ton of extra stuff thrown into there, and nobody understands what they are, and it doesn't sound like Infinity Ward or the devs were really ready to brag about any of it yet because they weren't sure how well it was going to be received. So it's going to be up to all of us to play it and figure out if we like it as a player base or not. Straight up, though, this game is not designed to keep up with Tarkov or compete with it. And according to Landmark, that's what the devs said bluntly and straight away. The COD developers never said anything like that. They never even mentioned Tarkov or talked about it. They called it an extraction BR.
The devs, like we talked to the devs and they straight up said, basically word for word, the internet thinks that we tried to make Escape from Tarkov, but that's not what we tried to do.
So no, this isn't going to kill Tarkov. And honestly, nobody should have ever thought that to begin with. This is going to be a completely new style of BR that I think is going to open up the market to a lot of players that have never considered stuff like this before. So at the end of the day, I think it's going to do the opposite of what a lot of people on the internet thought it was going to do as far as the whole kill Tarkov thing. If anything, it's going to push more people to it and maybe make people come and play it. I mean, the way I see it, if you had a scale of, and Tarkov's here and Call of Duty's here, what you end up having is DMZ is much over on this farther end of it. It's so far away from Tarkov, it's not even funny. It's not even comparable, but it does move that direction. So it's going to introduce all of these COD players and Warzone players to game mechanics that they've never really had before. Now, as a game mode, it's built off of Warzone. That's pretty apparent. Same maps, similar mechanics, but entirely different gameplay mode. It has the armor plates and health system similar to Warzone. Weapons, gears, kill streaks, utility items, all of that stuff loots like it kind of does in Warzone. But based on what we heard from Dr. Lupo and what he's tweeted out, this wasn't completely representative of what the final build, the game mode, we're going to be playing next week. So keep that in mind with a lot of this. Some aspects look like they were cut or trimmed down just to get the action going and keep the players in the game for that very short 2-hour window we had. This means we missed out on a ton of the pre and post raid and mechanics, the stuff to do with inventory and stuff. Even though there's not a lot there was still stuff we didn't get to see all that much of. And honestly, that's one of the more important parts of an extraction-based looter shooter, if you will. Like, the whole point of extracting with stuff is so that you get to use it again. There's that carry on, that excitement of getting loot out. If it just turns into XP, then it doesn't really matter, right? But just based on what I saw in the UI, it looks like you're going to be able to get out things like guns, keys, maybe even some limited gear. Doesn't get turned into money, and then that gives you that much better gear you can go into your next match with. It sounds like the streamers were given gear you wouldn't normally have access to. That way they could spend most of their time exploring the map and the game modes or the missions and things like that. Lupo mentioned in a Twitter conversation that the kits are going to have cooldowns, so that if you lose one, you can't just gear up with the same thing again. You're going to need to use stuff that you got out of a previous match. And it also sounds like the dev team wants to grow this, and they asked for feedback from the players. And from what Landmark said, Lupo and both of them gave some pretty blunt feedback, and it was mostly focused around, you know, that loot system at the end, how there needs to be more to that with the inventory management, and that needs to mean more.
And also, you have to think, when we played it too, they gave us like some gear and stuff to use to start. They wanted like brutally honest feedback after. We gave them lots of criticisms and stuff, and it's going to be an evolving type of thing.
So I think it's very likely we're going to see more of that in the future. Now, in game, it was almost overwhelming. There was so much stuff on the screen to look at and try to figure out. With the missions, the AI, vehicles, all the stuff going on, you couldn't really tell what some of the stuff they didn't go check out was. And again, this just boils down to the 2 hours they had to explore it. It just wasn't enough, which is fine. We'll get to play it in a week. But that's just that much more we're going to have to figure out. But they still were able to hit up some high points. I think one of the more fun ones is they called in a mission that a helicopter flew in and dropped off a boat, and it had a package on it, and they had to take that to another point. And unbeknownst to them, once they got it and started driving, an AI chopper gunner showed up and started blasting them. They had to fight that off. Once they fought that off, they could get to the other helicopter, which picked up the package, and then they got a bunch of money in their rewards, which was pretty cool. It was an interesting engagement, especially because it was so surprising. And from what it looked like, there was tons of these varied kinds of missions, and they're only going to get more organic and more exciting as you get more players involved and the PvP aspect shows up and you're trying to fight off a chopper gunner and a 3-man squad all at the same time. Now, the AI itself in the matches was on both ends of the spectrum from what we saw. The common AIs, if you will, that were out in the open or weren't near any high value points were just straight out not threatening at all. But the AI inside objectives or inside high value areas, whatever you want to call them, they were absolutely absurd. And it just didn't seem like there was really much in between. So we'll have to see if they do any kind of tweaks on stuff like that going forward. Landmark mentioned in a stream today that they had talked about how much work they've done on the AI and how far it's changed from what it originally was. So that sounds like something that's a big focus for them. So as you throw hundreds of thousands of players at these and all the matches that come with it, they're going to be able to get a lot of data and really tweak the AI to fit what the player base needs to have in order for it to be a fun game mode. And then another aspect that was emphasized by almost everybody was how unorganic the PvP felt, because they didn't have full servers because they just didn't have enough people there. So there's going to be more engagements in the real version versus what they saw, which is really going to change how the game flow happens as far as fighting AI versus fighting players and what's on the map and what's not. Now, the missions were very much like Spec Ops, Spec Ops Lite, if you will. They were mini versions of a lot of the missions that are in Spec Ops. Different flavors of it, but that's kind of how they felt watching Landmark and Lupo and Myth play through them. Loading in, you spawn on the ground near the edge of the map, so you don't drop in like you do Warzone. From there, you'll fight AI almost immediately, it looks like, and start to loot. From here, it's up to you. You can find missions on the ground or missions you came in with. There are some missions that are just AI encounters, others that pull players together to instigate PvP. Now, the loot seems to be pretty simple for now. Items are worth money. You take them to a buy station, sell them, and which you can use that to buy various upgrades, gun, gear, kill streaks, all that kind of stuff. We saw things worth just, like $5, $10, all the way up to some things that were worth like $8,000. And then on top of that, completing missions also give you cash. An interesting thing that I saw that was pretty cool is items auto loot. Like if you pick up, I think there was like wires or something in a computer, I can't remember, or thumb drives. If you have one of those in the inventory and you loot the computer and there is a thumb drive in there, it'll automatically loot that and stack it for you. So that's kind of nice. It also didn't look like there was a weight system or anything like that. So it's just limited by boxes, how many items you can pick up in a single box. The backpack system reminded me somewhat of how Apex plays, with some looting and backpacks, with bigger backpacks being available that also have additional slots and even special slots for things like weapons. So you could have your 2 weapons on you and then potentially a 3rd weapon in a backpack, which you would extract with if you find one that's pretty cool or has a lot of attachments on it. You also get keys to open up high value areas that have great loot, but pretty tough AI to fight through. Of all the different streamers I watched, most of them died to AI at some point. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out once we get more players involved in each map, because there wasn't really that many examples of people getting out alive and succeeding. And because of this, we didn't get to see this aspect of how DMZ really moves away from other BRs with how its end game, its conclusion mechanic works. In DMZ, you have extracts that look like 3 that you could go to at any point. You could spawn in, you could kill 1 or 2 AIs, or not even do that. You could run straight for an extract for whatever reason and get out. And the way it works is, it looked like to me, there might be more to this, but from what we saw is you walk up, it's a helo landing spot of some sort, you shoot a green flare into the air, and then shortly thereafter, a CH-53 it looked like, or some other kind of big helicopter shows up, back ramp opens, you climb into it, and then you kind of got to hang out for a second and wait, and then it'll fly away and you extract. So in an aspect, that's kind of like the Cycle Frontier, where the extract isn't immediate. It's not like Tarkov, where you have 6-7 seconds, you got to sit at a point and then you're out, right? This is, you're going to sit there for much longer on a very, very obvious target. It also means that if somebody's there before you, you could potentially have to fight your way in. You can't just get a free extract. One of the really cool mechanics though that I saw was it looked like you can hang on the outside of the helicopter. So helicopter's full of squad and you see them in there and you run up at the last second, you jump on and hang onto the helicopter for dear life as it flies away and hope they don't try to shoot you through the windows or something. Don't know how that's going to work, but it sounds like it provides some pretty interesting moments for gameplay going forward. Now, there's also a radiation zone, and this is the aspect that works kind of the opposite of other BRs. You know, other BRs have a ring that gets smaller and smaller and shrinks down and forces players together eventually. In this game mode, the radiation zone starts at the map. It's kind of small. And then after 25 minutes, the radiation zone starts to expand, and it expands steadily. It's not in stages, it just grows. And it does this over 8 minutes. And the radiation zone does a little bit of damage to you. It doesn't look like it's a lot. It's enough to be annoying and eventually kill you if you just sit inside of it, but not enough to where if you're in it, you're screwed in like 10 seconds. But what this will do is it pushes to other extracts, or it opens up different extracts once that starts to expand. And anybody left will get to that. There's supposedly better loot at this period of time, so there is a reward for staying long. The exact mechanics, again, we didn't get to see a lot of it, so not a lot to report there about that. Now, with all of these different mechanics, one thing I did see is the potential for some tons of extract camping, which is pretty familiar to players in Tarkov, not so much to other players. So be prepared to fight your way out. There's things like weapon crates and other quests or missions, if you will, that once you select them, everybody on the map can see you. You know, it's kind of like some of the Warzone missions that, you know, you got to kill a VIP or whatever, right? These ones show a giant weapon crate, for example, that shows where you're at and people can see where the extracts are. So they see you going for it. They could run there and just wait for you and camp you out and cut you down when you show up. So you got to keep in mind that people are going to know exactly where you're headed when you're getting out with some of these high ticket items. Now, once you're out of the raid, from what we saw, the stash system is very, very limited. Mostly everything you survive with gets converted into XP, but you did keep some things like guns that look like a little bit of gear, and then keys, which then you could take those into your next mission and use those and not have to hunt for them. So if you get like a couple of good keys, instead of trying to randomly hunt around for them, you could use those in the next raid and go right for that point right out the gate and kind of get an advantage. But this sounds like something that's going to be worked on going forward, at least hopefully. Landmark said in their feedback session at the end, that was what he pushed on the most. And from what they sounded like, they were willing to work on it. There was more stuff to come out of that. And I see it as, just think about Warzone. Think about all the different mechanics that were added or taken away or cycled through from what Warzone was a couple of years ago to where it is now. Now, overall, I'm looking forward to playing it. I have no other way to describe it. It looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. It's going to have a wider player base to play with than just Tarkov. But I wasn't looking for a game to replace Tarkov, so I'm not even looking at it like that. And honestly, I don't know if a game ever could replace Tarkov. That's just not something that is going to happen, I think, in the industry. Tarkov's too unique. For all its faults, it is something special, and I don't know that we're ever going to see somebody go to that level again. I think one of the downsides of DMZ is that it doesn't look like it has enough of a risk-reward mechanic to really have that long-term appeal like Tarkov does. Death just isn't punishing enough. If you die, it's not like you're losing stuff that's, you know, I don't want to say irreplaceable, but, you know, in Tarkov, when you die, you can lose an hour, 2, 3 hours worth of gameplay worth of gear, whereas on DMZ, if you die, you just got to wait for your cooldown or something to expire and you get another kit. Plus everything that you would get out of raid with, you can get in the next raid if you wanted to. So death just isn't going to be all that punishing. But you know what? I'm pretty sure that's how the game is designed. When you're trying to build a game for a wide swath of players, you can't make it punishing, at least too punishing, because if you do that, you're going to drive players away. And that's not how Call of Duty works. It's meant to be played by as many people as possible. And unfortunately, a lot of players out there don't like or want hardcore mechanics. So again, what I would recommend is everybody tries it for themselves. It's free. We don't get that a whole lot, especially from big games like this. Now, between now and then, Landmark actually said he's going to do a Q&A. There's a Google Sheet you can go ask questions on. I'll throw a link down in the description you can go look at. And then he's going to do a YouTube video answering all of these questions. So you'll be able to hear from the man himself and get your direct questions answered from him on some of his experiences or some of the behind scenes stuff he asked about. I did include some of the clips there on some of the questions I saw asked in his stream or that I asked. So we got a little bit of it, but you're going to get much more when he does that. As far as me, once it drops on the 16th, I'm going to put a ton of hours into it to really put it through its paces, see what its potential is. So don't hesitate to come by the stream and ask any question you want. I'll do my best to answer them. We'll be doing videos on it, talking about the highs and the lows, the positives and the negatives, because there's going to be both. There always is. Now, don't forget to hit that like button, because if you're still here at this point, you definitely like the video. I can't imagine you stayed this long if you didn't. And hit subscribe if you want to see more Call of Duty content, but don't unsubscribe. I've been seeing a lot of people unsubscribe, like maybe they're afraid I'm going to stop doing Tarkov content, and that's not going to happen. We're just going to do both. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.
Yo, I glance over every once in a while, dude. There's just like dudes in chat that are like, game's fucking trash. Bro, you're sitting at home, you haven't even played it. Relax.